Fearscape Media Network, exploring the unknown, one podcast at a time. Fearscape Paranormal Podcast, part of the Fearscape Media Network. Prepare to be spooked. New episodes every Wednesday on all major podcast platforms. Find out more at fearscapepodcast.com.
Ghosts in the Attic, Spies in the Basement is a paranormal true crime podcast.
If you enjoy tales of horror, lore, and the unexplained,
murders, mystery, and so much more,
tune into our bi-weekly podcast.
With us, your hosts, Anna Timperley
and Lindsey Behee, coming March 17th.
To the Fearscape Media Podcast Network.
Available on Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, and wherever else you may listen to your podcasts.
Coming to you from nowhere, a suburb of parts unknown. Your ghoulish hosts for an evening of terror. Stefan Gearhart and Lance Wayne, the Misters of the Dark.
Good evening, dear friends. Welcome to another terrifying episode of Misters of the Dark, the greatest horror podcast in the history of horror podcasting. As always, we're beaming directly to you from nowhere, a suburb of parts unknown, and I'm your headmister, Lord Stefan Gearhart.
And I'm your co-mister, the man with no name, Lance Wayne. And I think you'll be pleased to hear, Stefan, that you shouldn't fret over tonight's guest. I followed your orders implacably.
So you read the books?
Yes, I read the books.
Good man, Lance. I must admit, I tell you, you had me a little on edge because I know you're not much of a reader outside of the occasional obituary from time to time.
Well, as I stated earlier, my dear headmister, you had no need to worry. I breezed right through it.
Right through it? Huh?
Yep. I was a little surprised that you gave me something so light.
Lance, let me see that book. What is this? Oh my God, you idiot!
What?
The Necronomicon?
Whoa. Now hold on a minute. Don't go making accusations. I never do anything to those bodies after we kill them.
No, you asshole! The Book of the Dead!
The Book of the what?
Oh, you've really gone and done it now!
Stefan, what do we do?
I don't know, just keep it cool. We'll have to settle this mess after our guests have left. Dear friends, will you please welcome horror authors Lindsey Behee and Anna Timperley? Hey, ladies, thank you guys so much for coming over to the dilapidated mansion.
Yes,
so
hello.
Excited. Hi.
Sorry,
Hi,
we
thanks
didn't
for
bring any
having us.
wine. I drank it on the way over here.
We have some Klingon blood wine. I can't promise it's Klingon blood, but it's Klingon.
And the blood of virgins.
And the blood of virgins. So my old best friend, I'm gonna tell you this right now before we even get started. My best friend from college, Santosh, he had this roommate that had a speech impediment. Now, I'm not making fun of speech impediments, y'all. I'm just saying. But this guy couldn't say his V's, and it was always with a W. And he was always like, Santosh, I just hate the fact that I'm still a virgin.
Oh, Lord.
That's adorable.
Send all your hate mail.
I'm
to-
just
That-
very,
and that line
very
didn't
upset
get
about
any
it.
women?
Huh?
I said that line didn't get him any women.
Oh, good God, no. He looked like the Penguin from Batman Returns.
Oh, my God.
Well, that'll do it.
That'll do it. I don't even remember the dude's name, and I'm glad because I'd totally put him on blast. But it's just
Hey, Danny
every
DeVito
time.
has a wife, doesn't he?
Yeah. Rita
Rita Perlman. Yeah, Rhea Perlman.
She looks like Dio.
She
She looks like freaking Dio.
I'm not gonna be able to not see her anymore and not think about Dio.
That's awesome.
But yeah, so every time I hear virgin, immediately my brain goes to virgin, and it's over.
Word.
It's over. But anyways, thank you guys coming over. We are so pumped to have some horror authors. And listen, we're not going to pigeonhole you. We know you're more than just horror. Okay, we know you're more than just horror. But we like horror, and we like what you've done. So,
well, thank you.
Well, thanks.
So want to get started. I know first and foremost, the books I'm mostly familiar with are the ones that, of course, Lindsey and I go way back a little bit because I read Paranormal-ish. She's had some stories on some of my other shows and some things like that. Such a fun book. And then Anna, I love your collection of Dark Tales Twisted.
Thank you.
So much fun. But the cool thing is you guys also wrote a book together. Isn't that right?
We did.
Yes,
we
we did.
co-authored Lost in Gray.
Lost in Gray. I mean, I'm excited about that. What's that about? What's that one about?
Do you want to take that one, Lindsey, or do you want me to take it?
Sure. So basically what it's about is Becca Charles, her life is just kind of spinning out of control, and she made some mistakes in her past, and now she's being haunted by them, and she feels like she's just going absolutely insane. And you have to kind of go with her to see how that goes.
That's so much fun. Now, how did you guys get connected? Have you guys known each other a long time? Or was it just something that just kind of happened to write something together?
We met, our husbands were former military, and we were stationed at the same base in Colorado, and she lived like 3 doors down from me. And we met through my neighbor who my husband worked with, and she just happened to already know. And the rest is history.
That's convenient. Wow. That's convenient.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. Like, my daughter met her husband first. That's how the introductions actually happened. And he was like, your kid's weird, right? I was like, oh yeah, what'd she do now?
What'd she do? Man,
I'm 32. My parents still got to ask that.
Yeah, same with mine. I absolutely love that. So very, very cool. Now, the obvious things, we got to hit up is, how did you get your fascination of horror? Like, what is it that led you to say, you know what, this is something that I'm interested in. I want to write about scary stuff. Like, for both of you, this is a good question for both of you to ask or to answer separately.
For me personally, my first dive into messed up books was V.C. Andrews, which is not horror lit at all, but they're just screwed up. And when you're reading them at 12, it kind of warps your brain into a certain way of reading, so to speak. And then I got into Stephen King, obviously, who doesn't love Stephen King. But I really love Gillian Flynn, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with her work. She wrote Gone Girl.
Okay. Yeah.
And so Gone Girl, I seen the movie poster first, and it had Ben Affleck on it, looking all broody and dark and mysterious, and I was like,
Ben Affleck,
okay,
pre-Batman.
So, pre-Batman. He's playing a dark, ominous role. I'm interested. Turns out it was a book, and I got really interested in the book, and I devoured it in a day. Her brain, the way it works, the way she writes, it's not necessarily horror lit, it's more thriller, psychological, mind warp type stuff. And I love it. Those are the type of books I can just get lost in for hours. And the next thing you know, the sun's peeking through the blinds, and you're like,
forgot to sleep.
That's a never ending story. I saw that movie. It's good.
But she actually wrote the screenplay for the movie. That's why it's so good.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Yeah,
fun little tidbit.
Have not read the book, but I have definitely seen the movie. Excellent.
Yeah, same here. Yeah.
Very, very cool. Yeah, I very much agree with you. I'm like that. Yeah, I get lost, and I agree with you too. It's 50 years ago, thriller really wasn't a thing. It was just you either had horror, sci-fi, drama, or comedy. I mean, that was really about it.
Or mysteries, maybe.
Mystery kind of hit thriller a little bit more. But yeah, I like that, and I do. I think thriller kind of hits horror more than we think.
Well, yeah, because if you think about it, it dives into the psyche. It teaches you that people are the monsters, not that the monsters are figmental, demons and whatnot.
Or an alien spider thing living in the sewers.
Right. Well, and even then, sometimes, the human monsters are a little too real. They're the guy next door.
Silence of the Lambs and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if it wasn't for all the, because that film does have some gorier parts. If they cut that out, it probably would just be a straight up thriller.
Yeah. Well, and there was a lot of talk about that when it got nominated.
Because they didn't want to say horror.
Mm-hmm. They did not want to say horror, but it is. Come on, man.
Yeah.
But to each his own. It's also a point of view. Because horror to me is different than horror to you. And is it thriller? Is it mystery? Is it body horror? Is it all of these different things? It's very, very intriguing. I just like stuff that makes me think and be scared at the same time. Like my wife. Keeps me on my toes. She keeps me on my toes. And what about you, Lindsay? How about you? How did you get into horror?
Well, it started, my mom has always been a Stephen King fan. And so the books were just always around the house. And I remember reading some, I remember trying to read some, probably way too young. And I just couldn't follow. And then I read a little bit in high school, and then more Stephen King in adulthood or whatever. But then I got into like more horror, like movie type stuff when I started working in a haunted house in Frankfurt.
Yeah.
And so like you're around all the characters, and so you have to watch the movies to see what's going on. And the rest is history, I guess.
The rest is history. I agree with that too. Yeah. It's so funny. I mean, Stephen King is definitely a gateway drug. And it's funny hearing your story, because that reminds me, my dad was a Stephen King fan, right? And so it was the same thing. And I'm like 10 trying to read The Stand. And I'm like, what is this? Like,
Hard to follow that young, but I tried. I remember trying to read The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I ever finished it, but I was probably like 4th grade, and I couldn't read that.
What got me?
Nor should you read that in 4th grade.
Right. The one that got me, what ended up my first full Stephen King book was the first Dark Tower book, because the copy that I had like painted pictures throughout it. It was an illustrated version. I mean, it probably had 10, 15 beautiful pictures. I mean, I had this probably up till about 2 or 3 years ago, until I gave it to my nephew. But yeah, that was the one that I read through, because I read comic books a lot. And so like, I knew that if I could keep reading, I could get to this chapter that would have this beautiful art that looked like that famous fantasy artist guy. Looked very similar. Yeah, Frank Frazzetti, but but was all about the gunslinger. Like, it was so cool. That's what drew me in. And then I realized that a lot of movies I had already seen and stuff like that was that same author and stuff like that. Good times. You got
I like probably about a year and a half ago, I listened to the audio book of It. I think, what is that guy's name? He played Jack Torrance in the TV version of The Shining. Steve Weber?
Oh, yeah. From Wings, the guy
from Wings. Yeah. But I listened to that, and it was like 24 hours long.
Ooh.
And it took me so long to read it.
Same.
Yeah. Same. But I tell you, for some reason, listening to it in audio form, because I mean, it took me like a month, and then there was just one weekend where I had nothing to do, so I was like, I'm just gonna lay around and listen to this. By the end of it, I remember I was driving to work at like 5:30 in the morning, finishing this thing up finally, and I was literally like, because it just
at the end it gets a little twisted.
Oh my gosh, it melted my brain.
I read Under the Dome. That was my first big. I read his short stories, but Under the Dome, and there's a scene in there where guy, no names, guy kills girl, kills other girl, hides them in a specific location, and then defiles their corpses. And I was like, what did I get myself into?
Yeah. Why can't I stop?
And I was like, exactly, why can't I stop? And that's the part of my brain that I'm fascinated by. It's like what makes me tick. And when people can write things that make me go, huh, that's new.
Yeah.
I like finding that out about myself.
Yeah.
I like to call it crossing the English class line. Because in high school, there's only so much you can do, or else you're getting sent to the counselor's office. So whether you're reading or writing, you cross that line of what's appropriate for high school English class.
That's awesome. That's an awesome way of putting it.
We struggled a lot with that with Lost in Grace. She was like, I don't know. And I was like, no, let's do it. Let's drive it home.
We're not in high school. We're adults.
Yes.
The more messed up, the better.
I mean, yeah.
Sell!
That's like college. I can remember.
Crazy.
I can remember I took a poetry class, and my professor was literally the professor from the beginning or the middle there or the end of Dead Poet Society, the one that replaced Robin Williams. Like he was literally like, I don't listen, you guys. I know most of you have probably seen Dead Poet Society. We don't need that shit in here. There's a form and blah blah blah. And I was like, well, I'm gonna enjoy this class.
Yeah, really.
I can remember.
With all that being said, I'm gonna.
I wrote this poem that was about. I was abused as a kid, and I wrote my very first memory is of being abused by my stepfather, and I wrote a poem about it because he wanted us to write about our thing, and he tried to tell me I made it up and was just telling me that there was too much emotion in it and all this different stuff, and I'm like, who are you?
In poetry?
Next.
Yeah. And then he's like, by the way, buy my book. It's at Barnes & Noble. So we decided to go to Barnes & Noble, and we check out his book of poetry, and it was god awful.
Was it dry?
Oh,
if you can't have emotion in poetry.
It was so dry. It was like the owl hoots in the tree, and the stars shine down, and his eye glistens.
It's like telling a
rat. Like it was so bad.
It's like telling a guitar player, can you play more bland?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, it was the same thing. It's like like something else somebody wrote. He was like, this is cliche. It's what you wrote is cliche. It's just like this poet. None of us had ever heard of that poet in our entire lives. So is something cliche if you've never heard of them before? Like, that's the question, right? Is it cliche if just because someone's written it somewhere around the world, like it was weird.
Somebody's written everything somewhere.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, Joseph Campbell will tell you that too. Like there's only 2 real stories in the entire world or something like that.
Well, it's I don't think the quote is I think he quotes whoever quoted this, but I've always heard Richard O'Brien, the guy who pretty much created Rocky Horror.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard him say in countless interviews that anybody that thinks they're original has no sense of history. I think about that quote a lot. Because it's the truth.
So,
and that's something I struggle with when I write is like, has this been done before? Is this original enough? And then at some point you just have to say, well, I'm writing this, so it's my take on it.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, my dad, God, as much as he loves Stephen King, he don't read much of that anymore. He's like old and does nothing but read mystery books now. Like, I mean, he reads like 4 or 5 a week. Like,
oh wow,
he has just completely emptied the library. He's now on Kindle. He's like emptied Kindle. Like, and I'm watching movies with him because like 10 minutes in, he's like, it was the guy that has the cat. Like, I'm like, but
he should be a detective.
Yeah, but yeah, he's that guy, and it's not. He loves the same old shit, right? That's his thing. It's like it doesn't matter to him that he loves reading it and he loves those things. So we love those stories. That's what matters. And it's like, to me, it's about what can you add to that story with your own personal flavor.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is the question. Which brings me to you, and I wanted to talk about The Dedication, which is a really cool book.
Thank you.
And I saved it on purpose to talk about that particular flavor there because, we have some short stories. We've got a book with Lindsey, but then we've got this powerhouse book that needs to have like 20 books in the series, so tell us a little bit more about this and where this idea came from.
So I tend to have like repeat nightmares, and that's how like the gods are telling me like write this story. And it's like the aliens are tuning into me or something. I don't know. So I had this nightmare where I went to church with my sister-in-law, and they were all in like white robes or gray robes, and if you weren't a member, you were in a gray robe. And I was like, well, how do you join this stupid church? And she was like, oh, you just tithe. And I was like, okay, well, how much money do you need? Because like I'm kind of broke. And she was like, oh, they just need your soul. And then I woke up and I was like, that's messed up.
Yeah.
And so, but then I had it like 7 times, and I was like, okay, so I'm not gonna write it exactly like that because it'll make a lot of churchy people angry. So I'm gonna put a little bit more of a demonic spin to it. So I figured that the premise of the book is it's a Xandamal. He's a demon and he's bored with his afterlife. He wants to shake up his hell, so to speak. And how does he do that? He lures a preacher amongst others into collecting souls for him at a church, which happens to be built on a crossroads. So that's the dedication.
You gotta love it, man. Wow. I love Crossroad Demons. I'm a sucker for Crowley from Supernatural as well.
Xandamal's a lot like Crowley, I feel.
You know,
He's
and
sassy.
Robert Johnson's story. I mean, I just love Crossroads Demons because it's funny to think about a demon because we think about them in a sense being all powerful and things like that. Yet a Crossroads demon is kind of like has a purpose, like a very specific purpose.
And they're low on the totem pole.
Yes. I love that. And that's why I love this, putting a church right there. And so it's like every time I see a church, if it's at a crossroads, I already know what I'm going to be thinking about.
Well, and it's funny too to me because like I made him sassy and he hates technology, but then he gets like a cell phone in the book and he's like, why do I have this human thing? Oh wait, to appear more human. It's just like, I tried to make it like, why would a crotchety old demon have a cell phone? Oh, to appear more human, because he's trying to blend in.
Yeah, like Lindsey Graham.
Things. Yeah.
Like Lindsey Graham. It's funny because I saw Lindsey Graham on the news, like, I don't know, I guess during the hearing for the riots and stuff. And he's walking down there and he's on his phone. Well, that's legit a flip phone. Like he went into AARP and was like, hey, I'll sign up for one of those free phones, please. Like, I'm like, you're in Congress. If anybody needs a smartphone, it's you. Like, oh man, that's just some funny shit, man. But yeah, dedication, super cool. I want to get back to you, Lindsey, because I've read Paranormal for like 50 million times because I keep wanting to see all the stories and put them on all my shows.
Thank you.
So tell me about Paranormal-ish, because I know that there's some true stories in there as well as fiction and stuff like that. And so how did that all come about for you? And what are some of your favorite kind of stories? You don't have to tell the whole story, but just kind of talk about your favorite ones in there.
Well, it all started, a lot of it, kind of like what Anna said, is I have a tendency to have nightmares. And so it really, that mixed with some anxiety, makes your brain just go all sorts of different places. And then also add in, I have had some paranormal experiences. So then you add that in.
Good ones too.
Yeah. And I will say there are a few that in Paranormal-ish that are a little embellished just to make it sound more like a story. I remember one in particular. It was, I can't remember the title right now, of course, but it's the story where it starts where the narrator was 10 and is seeing ghosts and stuff. A lot of that is from my real life, but slightly exaggerated. And I remember my dad read it and he goes, "You're telling me this has all been happening since you were 10 years old?" I was like, only some of it. And
who did we raise?
People are like, how did I go her whole life never knowing this?
I should have tried talking to her.
That'll make or break a parental kid relationship. That'll make or break it there, because your parents are either gonna be like, "Oh God, what happened to you?" or "You see that shit too?" Like that's
my mom for sure. Like
that's what happened to my mom for sure.
When my kids tell me weird things, I'm always like, "Oh, are you sure you weren't dreaming?" But in my head, I'm like, "Oh my God, she said she saw this." Okay, I'm taking notes and I'm going to research this later.
Oh, man, my co-host on Fearscape, we talk about that all the time because he has twins. Both of them see shit all the time. And he's like, "God, I don't want to not tell them, but I also know it'll scare them, but I also want to tell them, hey, I believe this too. It is real. You're not crazy." And so he's always kind of like skirting the line and trying to find ways
story of my life, honestly.
Tell them. But our friend Victoria, she grew up in a household that was very, very haunted in California. And there was this knocking that was like at her like window or something every night or whatever. She finally like tells her mom and dad, and her mom and dad are like, "Well, yeah, the place is haunted." Like they're like, and you know, because she's like, "Do you hear it right now?" They're like, "Yeah, we hear it right now." And that scared her even more. She's like, I'm glad they told me, but like I was so scared I slept with them for a month.
Oh,
well, you know, what's funny is the first ghost I ever saw, I was maybe like late elementary school age. I don't remember exactly. And I woke up and I saw a silhouette sitting on the end of my bed. And I'm sitting here like, who's on my bed? Oh, nobody. Like hiding under the blankets, like, please just fall asleep. Please just fall asleep. As an adult, a few years ago, I'm on the phone with my sister, and apparently a lot of our friends who grew up in the same neighborhood have all seen that same woman.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like nobody told me?
See, now,
also, why do we think blankets can save us?
I don't know, but they do. They do. I used to think Dracula was going to get me all the time. I slept with my rosary and a necklace of garlic every night.
Oh my gosh.
And I would get night hags early on, and like the garlic would help bring me out sometimes. Like that was
like
legit.
the overwhelming smell.
Like a nice grounding.
Because much like you guys, I've had nightmares that have gone. The difference is mine aren't repeating. Mine have continued. I've literally had a storyline that's existed since I was like 4 years old that has continued. Wow. It's been probably about 1.5 years since I've had one, but I've been trying. One of these days, I'm going to write this whole.
My mom deals with that.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. It's about vampires because when I was a kid, they scared me more than anything. And then I got into college where I started thinking they were cool because of Buffy and stuff like that. And I was able to defeat them all of a sudden. And like, you know, then like later they started evolving and I couldn't. It was just crazy. It continues. It's really cool.
My mom deals with that. Yeah. She's trying to compile them into a story one day.
Yep, I will too. I promise. But your mom, Lindsay, as well, like dealt with some night hag stuff too, because I did one of her stories. Like,
yeah, she deals with I'm not gonna remember the name of it now. It's not sleep paralysis, it's omnagausia or something like that. It's where you're still dreaming when you wake up.
Yeah.
And so basically she'll wake up and she'll see like a skeleton.
Yep.
Like
same.
Just hanging out in her living room or whatever. And so I can't even imagine how terrifying that is.
Oh, I deal with it as well. You know, one of the weird things that happened to me one time is one of the night hags that was there. They always lately, a lot of them have like these really long, gangly arms. They almost look like monkeys or something. But anyways, one was sitting on my chest, right, and it's like breathing and it's talking to me and all this stuff. And I'm like, I'm trying to scream for my wife's name. I'm trying to like call her name because she could wake me up. And well, she kind of stirs and she's like, Stefan, is everything okay? And the demon thing like puts his hand over her face and goes, mm-mm. And she goes and falls right back to sleep. And I'm like, I'm like,
I'll be like, this is the moment the demon's real.
That's the shit that happens. I'm like, did I really see that? Like,
I have something to admit. That was really me.
No, I mean, same size.
Yeah,
3 feet 12.
I just like watching you while you sleep.
But yeah, I definitely have that too, and that's so frightening. I'm like, just man, I can remember getting like my leg. There was like a portal on a wall. Every once in a while I sleep backwards. I don't know why, but I used to do it a lot. And I had my head at the foot of the bed while I wake up, and this demon comes through the wall, and I can see this like portal, almost like the warp, the wormhole in Deep Space Nine. It almost looks kind of just like that. And like he starts dragging me into the hole, and my foot's up against the wall. Like when I finally am able to scream for my best friend who's in the next room, he comes running in, and I'm crouched up against the wall. And so I was like, did that happen? Like, so there's some crazy shit out there. Yeah. That's not even fiction. There's some crazy shit out there.
Yes.
And so what about you, Anna? What about for Twisted There's? Is there any of that comes from real life for you, or is it all just straight from the brain?
So my son like escaped my house at one point, and we had to call 911 to find him. Oh, he was just being a jerk and hiding in the bushes out in the forest behind my house. And the cop bumped into him, and he goes, "Excuse me, I'm hiding here." So they weren't really all that concerned after that. They're like, "Oh, this kid's just pulling a prank." So then he tried to get out in the middle of the night. So I wrote a story about the little boy that goes to live with the gremlins or goblins or whatever. And that was about him escaping in the middle of the night. Like,
interesting.
Because my son escaped twice. And then the story that has a kid named Liam in it I think it's the very last story in the book. was one of those repeat dreams I had. And it was about, so my son was in my closet, but then I was like, why are you in my closet? And he was like, shush, I'm trying to sleep. And he was like, in my bed. And then the thing in my closet turned its head like an owl.
Oh, I got chills.
Oh,
and,
shit.
And like its eyes went black, and I was like, oh. And then the next night I dreamed that it was my husband that was the doppelganger, and it was just like repeated over and over and over again. And I was like, all right, cool, I'm gonna write this up because it's too crazy not to write.
Chills.
Same.
But
everybody thinks that shit just happens to kids, but it don't.
Yeah.
No, I've seen, like, I was sitting at my niece's house, and she lives kind of like downtown in the town that we live in. It's not like the worst neighborhood, but you know, it could be better. And the doorknob like starts to turn, and I was like, oh, we're gonna die. It's like it's like 11:30 at night. We're gonna die right now, because everybody that was supposed to be in the house was in the house, and the door like pushes open all like, you know, movie style slow. Yeah, there's no one there.
Oh, jeez.
Nobody.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, all right, I'm gonna be bad. So my anxiety like took a back seat, and I went outside and I like looked around. There was
fight or flight, man.
There was nobody there, and I was like, oh, so that was a ghost. And then she's got sage and like this little like feather, and she's like, like trying not to cry. And I was like, yeah, this is messed up. I was like, it's gonna be okay. She's like, I'm gonna sleep at grandma's. I was like, no. I was like, it's gonna be fun. She's like, we don't have enough wine for this.
You know, it's so funny. It's like so many of us like have like these stories and stuff like that, and like, you know, we get really into horror, we get it really into the paranormal and things like that. Yet people always ask me all the time, why are you still so scared all the time? Doesn't that bother you? I'm like, I don't know. But like my friend Josh, he's coming out to visit me in Phoenix, and we're going to go out into the desert and go look for UFOs. Like, it's
ooh, fun.
And we've got like night vision cameras and everything. It's going to be crazy. But anyways, he's like, what would you do if a gray alien showed up in front of us? I said, well, I'll either pass out, push you in front of it, or run. There's nothing else.
It would be push you in front of it, run, then pass out.
That's what he said. You would try to run. You would get scared because you'd almost trip. You'd think it was grabbing you. You'd pass out. It would hit me, and then I would fall forward into the alien. Is what he said.
You know,
like, I mean,
I'm a 3
Yeah.
You know, I will say I had to drive through. We went to Nevada this last summer for a family thing, and we had to drive through Roswell and Area 51.
Oh wow!
And both times, especially driving like right in the outskirts of like Roswell, it's just fields and there's nobody around. And I was just like, oh God, like this is how we die. And then on our way back,
like driving through Kansas.
Yeah.
No, it's like Kansas is boring. But then like driving to I felt uneasy, and I was like, oh, this is it for sure. But then driving back from Nevada back down to Texas, we hit Roswell at like 4 a.m.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, great. And surprisingly, there were people that were just out riding bikes at like 4 a.m.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, at first I was like, they just must be on drugs. But then I mentioned it to my dad, and he was like, or they were just trying to fit in with the humans. Didn't quite get it.
Funny.
But no, actually nothing happened though, but it was very uneasy to drive through. But there was one time, my husband, we live in West Texas, oil field life. For a while, a few years ago, he actually worked in New Mexico. And there was one weekend where the kids and I loaded up and we drove to New Mexico to visit him. And we are in some no-name town, like borderline, like right before New Mexico and Texas. I don't know where we were. I can't even remember. There was no cell phone service, no radio stations, no other cars on the road, nothing. And I just see a bright light just go straight down the sky. And I was like, oh. And I remember, you know, when you come across the town in the distance and there's just like faint light. And you know that there's a town coming up.
Yep.
That started happening, and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do if I drive up here and it's actually a crashed UFO. And it turned out to just be a town. But I've never been so scared in my life driving.
Yeah, that phone call was intense. She's like,
once I got cell phone service,
I finally have cell phone service. I don't know what to do. I think I'm gonna find a UFO. And I was like, wait, backstory.
Yeah. No, I have your story. We are actually looking to use it soon because we've been kind of doing on my other show because we've been doing UAP and UFO sightings as our listener stories. So
you should talk to my sisters about that.
Oh, totally. We would totally do that. But yeah, I used to live in New Mexico, so I know.
Yeah.
I went down to Roswell. I've been there a couple times. It's actually a pretty shitty town.
It is.
Though the McDonald's is super cool because
I never saw it. I've seen pictures of it online, but when we drove through, we must have missed it.
But I went into the museum and it's pretty lame. It's literally just like blown up pictures of newspaper articles. It's like $20 to get in. You're like, I could have saw that on Google. But anyways, we were driving home. We left really late at night and we're driving home. We're probably like 25 minutes outside of Roswell, and moonless night. And there's no one on the road. It's the middle of, the desert. And like my friend's like, stop the car. And so we get out. It's so black, I can't see the hand in front of my face. That's how crazy it was. But we looked up, and I never saw so many stars in my entire life. I was like, no wonder a damn UFO crashed over here. Like, look, I'm like, I was so mad I didn't see anything because I was just like, this is the scariest shit. And then a cow mooed, and I jumped about 50 feet into air.
There's actually an alien grave at an old cemetery in Aurora, Texas.
Really?
What? My dad and we used to live in Fort Worth, and it's a town around the Fort Worth area. And right before we moved out here, one of my friends was like, well, you know about the alien grave. I was like, what? I've lived here for 5 years and you're just now telling me. Yeah. But so my dad was visiting at the time, so we loaded the kids up and drove, and we went and visited it. And it's just a big rock that people leave like all sorts of memorabilia around it. Like we left like some pennies on it, and it was wild. But and then on the ghost side of things, while we're walking around, there's a bunch of old graves. It's a really old.
Just
the alien crashed in the 1800s allegedly. And so it's like a really old cemetery. And my now almost 7-year-old daughter was just saying some like weird stuff about some of the graves. And I wish I could remember exactly what it was. I think she was like talking about how like these were twins and like just stuff that she shouldn't have known, just walking around the cemetery. And she was like so sad that we didn't have flowers to put on every single grave.
Oh, she has such a big heart.
Oh, but she's my one that is definitely.
And you'll find this in my next book, Alienish.
No, it should just be called Shit Nora Says.
Absolutely.
Some of the stuff that, like the doll, the creepy doll.
I forgot about that. When we were actually writing Lost and Grey at the time, so we're already on FaceTime all the time. It was even more so during that 2-week period that we wrote the book. And she's sitting there. She was 4 at the time.
Yeah.
So she was still at home, and she's just like, you remember when we went on that walk and we went into that empty house and there was nobody lived there, but there was a doll and she followed us home. And I'm like, what are you talking about?
Oh my God.
And she was so adamant.
Do you have this doll?
We were like, show us the doll.
No.
She goes, no, she can't come to us. Or like, she's like, she can't get to us now, though. And I'm like, I sure hope not.
It's like an Amish film. Like the little girl, she had that friend, that was the doll, whatever her name was.
Well, isn't the premise of Poltergeist like they talk to her through the TV? Like
the TV.
Yeah.
Well, Annabelle, my God.
Yeah, Annabelle.
Yeah.
Chucky.
Speaking of Annabelle, have you guys ever been to Zach Bagans' museum of?
No, I have not
heard of it.
I haven't ever been, but it's on my bucket list.
It's not. I hate Zach Bagans, but I want to see.
I do too, but I want to see all the weird stuff.
I know,
That's
right?
What everybody says.
Same
about
thing
Zach
with
Bagans.
the Warrens
Museum.
I want to see the Warrens stuff
too. In front of the
Aaron, poor Aaron.
I know.
Like this ghost will slit your throat. Aaron, go in there.
I know. He's like, fuck you, ghost. What are you gonna do? You gonna fucking come at me? And then the ghost comes at him. He's like, here, Aaron.
Yeah,
he's like locked in this room.
He's like King Bro of the ghost hunting community.
But yeah, I want to see that museum.
Bros,
I want to see the Warrens Museum, their stuff too, to see the original Annabelle.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
Are they still doing that since?
So
passed?
they're. I don't think
It's like an in-law or somebody doing it.
That's
now,
right.
Isn't it?
It's the son-in-law. The son-in-law is in charge
That's
of
really cool.
the Warren archives, everything now. But yeah, he's gonna make that money. That's
We're gonna have to make a pilgrimage, Lindsay.
Yeah.
man.
At some point.
All right, so I do want to bring up the fact that people don't know this yet, but you two are talking about putting together a new podcast. Can we talk about that a little bit? The name and what's going on and all that stuff.
Cat's out of the bag. Yeah, I'm fine with talking about meow.
ADHD, we're here.
It's going to be called Ghosts in the Attics, Bodies in the Basement. It's going to be a paranormal true crime podcast. So each episode, one of us will rotate between like who's more intrigued by this type of story that week. Rotate between a paranormal story and a true crime story, or sometimes they'll cross over and it'll be like this is fact or fiction type thing. So we're really jazzed about it.
That's awesome, man. That is so cool. I love, of course, true crime. I'm obsessed with true crime. One of the cool things, I got to interview Jeff Mudgett, who was the great-great-grandson of H.H. Holmes. And
That's
so
awesome.
he was really cool. He had that show American Ripper and stuff. And some of the stuff he told me about. And so it just fed my need for older true crime.
I wouldn't go around proclaiming that. You know what I mean?
What? That I love true crime? No, serial killers.
Well, like my great-great-grandfather, butchered millions of innocent.
Oh, are you kidding me? This has made him bank. He's got a book out. He had a History Channel show. He is trying because his big thing was that he's trying to connect, which is. The evidence looks pretty good that Jack the Ripper may have been H.H. Holmes because H.H.
I've heard
Holmes
that theory.
was in England at the time when all the Ripper murders happened. I mean,
really?
He's got the proof where he was on the ship that went over to England. This guy was a surgeon.
Oh, wow.
All it's really good evidence. Like, I gotta say, so
That would be really interesting if they could narrow that down and like put a pin in it.
Yeah, he's been trying to. That's what American Ripper was all about. And he was really mad because they changed the last episode on him without talking to him. And he was like, yeah, what they said there, that wasn't true. He's like, I'm going to give you the real deal. Because at the end, they tried to, because they dug up this body and it turned out to be H.H. Holmes. And they said that, or that it wasn't H.H. Holmes, excuse me, and because his DNA didn't match and different stuff like that. He's like, no, that's not what happened at all. They didn't want to do a second season. They were done. And they knew that if we had said that it was connected to me, that it was H.H. Holmes, they'd have to be a second season. And there was all this stuff. And they didn't want to do it because it's all about money. And because it was getting expensive. Like, one of the things was they found all these like barrels from the cement factory that they think Holmes hid some of the early bodies in because he worked at this cement factory right along the river there.
That's really cool.
And so they wanted to take a diving team because they had a radar thing that found them. They wanted to take a diving team. And History Channel told them that the city of Chicago said no, that they went to the mayor and all this stuff, and they said no, and that they couldn't do it. Well, like 2 years later, he meets Rahm Emanuel, the mayor of Chicago, and he's like, oh my God, I love your show so much. He's like, but it's weird that you guys said that we wouldn't allow you guys to do that. We would have absolutely done that. No one ever came to us about it. And so they just didn't want to spend the money on the diving team. So he is not a fan of History Channel.
I don't blame him. Yeah.
So he's been trying to get the rights out there to do, another movie or not another movie, but a movie or some things like that.
Yeah.
But COVID really put it on the sidelines.
Of course.
So, but yeah. Anyways, I love true crime. I'm super excited. What a great title.
Oh my God! I wish we had thought of that.
I know.
We got it first.
You do. And you said your first episode should be coming out when?
We're hoping for
St. Patrick's Day.
St. Patrick's Day.
Sorry, I interrupted your drum roll.
No, it's a beautiful drum roll regardless. But yeah, any particular reason for St. Patty's Day?
I mean, why not celebrate it the best way we can during COVID with some awesome Irish folklore, facts and fiction?
Yeah.
We'll definitely probably be doing some kind of leprechaun-oriented episode.
I didn't even think about that.
I was looking up Irish folklores today, and like, there's a lot of creatures, a lot I can't pronounce.
Oh yeah,
I'm doing my heritage a disservice because I don't speak that
Gaelic,
and I butcher it badly. But it's one of those things, like, there's so many creatures that there are to choose from, not just leprechauns, and a lot of people probably don't know that.
A lot of really popular ones that I had no idea were Irish in origin.
Like fairies in Irish folklore, they're like little demons, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. So you got your fairies and your
kinds
brownies.
Of fairies.
Yeah, because you got your brownies too.
Yeah, there's multiple kinds of fairies. So
the Fae. I prefer FAE. Yeah, just the whole British Isles, like that whole area, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, like just I'm Wiccan, and so I'm Irish, Scottish, Welsh, English, no surprise. And so I love looking into all of that stuff and all that lore. And it's just so many creatures that are untapped. Like I'm
gonna make my shepherd's pie like I do every year, and then I'm gonna dive into some Irish folklore. So I think it's gonna be a good time.
Well, we will absolutely make sure people get to hear that. We'll be putting it out for you and sharing it and telling everybody about it, because it's gonna be awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. We're pretty pumped.
So here's a story I meant to say earlier, but you talking about lore got me thinking about this. Is we did on Fearscape, we did an episode on the boogeyman, and so we talked about different types of boogeyman's around the world. Same thing with sleep hags years ago, where we talked about sleep hags around the world. Well, we got to this one called Babo Rogan. So he's like the male version of Baba Yaga. Right.
Yeah.
And it's really, really interesting. And so for years, when my nephew was little, up until about 3, maybe 4 years old, he would always say there was a man named Bobo in his room. Like, this kid has always been able to see shit. Well, my grandpa Bob died when I was 5. So my sister just always assumed that it was Grandpa Bob, because she's a medium, so she can see spirits and stuff, but she never had access, and she never understood why she couldn't see whatever it was. But he was always like, Bobo's playing music and all that stuff. So we always thought it was the cutest thing forever, until I did this Boogeyman episode and realized that Bobo Rogan goes by Bobo. That's his nickname that he tells children to call him by. He goes specifically to children and talks to children, and adults cannot see him. And his name is Bobo. Guess what he does? He plays music. I was creepy.
What's concerning to me is my almost 7-year-old, who we said sees all the weird stuff, she used to call sippy cups Bobo, and I never knew where she got it, because she never drank out of bottles.
It's so weird. And it's like,
so now that's concerning.
Some Eastern European, I forget where, when you're getting closer to Turkey, it's kind of that area. I can't remember. I have to look it up. But man, I told my sister, and she was just like, "Shut up."
It's like you just like crushed her soul,
right? Well, it's like, like you hear things, you always wonder where it comes from. Like, how many people call their kids Bugaboo? Right? You've heard Bugaboo. Like
I call my son Boogie.
There you go. Those are all terms for the boogeyman. That's where they came from. That people started taking them and trying to put them on kids to
lessen
the effect. Yes. And so that's where like
boogeyman's not scary. You're the boogeyman.
Yeah. Like, but hey, my little booger. Like, that's where booger. It's crazy.
Landon's nickname was Sugar Booger.
Sugar Booger.
It's like my granny used to say it. So it's like old people talk, and it just trickled down. If I'm around like certain family members for too long, my accent comes out real pop.
Oh man!
Or if I drink, or if I'm tired.
Yes.
Or any combination of the.
I gotta live with mine.
Yeah, he's Central Kentucky.
See, no, you didn't have an accent till you did that right there.
I don't know. When I hear this back, I'm like, God.
It all depends on who we're interviewing.
I'm from Kentucky. All my family's from Kentucky. I'm used to it.
And whenever I met Lindsay, she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry about my accent." I was like, "You have an accent?" She's like, "Well, I don't have an accent." I was like, "I don't hear one."
Well, it's funny.
We lived in Colorado when we met, and I remember I used to work retail, and I talk really fast, and I was just like, "Did you all find everything okay?" And the customer goes, where's y'all from? So I guess it sounded like I said y'all. And I'm like, oh, I'm from Kentucky. And he's like, well, yeah, we have people from Tennessee or that we know. And like, you sound like that. I'm like, no, I don't sound anything like a Tennessee's
a longer draw. But yeah,
I'm from Frankfurt, a little different.
With me growing up in Toledo, Ohio, and then moving to Kentucky when I was 14, like, it depends who I'm talking to, what I'm drinking, on which accent's going to come out. And my wife cracks up because when I'm with my family, that northern accent comes out real hard, you know, but then when I'm with her family or whatever, or with friends, or because a lot of my friends are from Eastern Kentucky as well.
That's where my mom's from.
Yeah. And it's just so funny. And when I moved out here to Phoenix, like, I have always just kind of felt like I have a middle of the road accent now, especially being an actor and things like that. My first day at work, they're like, man, you got an accent, don't you? And I'm like, what? I
still don't hear it.
Yeah.
But then I went back because, you know, my first day I work in a call center. So they made me go back and listen to a number of my calls. Well, I would hear certain phrases, certain things come out, like the word file. I say file. Every time. I mean, I can be like, hey there, I've pulled up your file. Like, it'll be like the most straight Midwest accent and then drop to Kentucky on like a number of different words. Ridiculous.
I do that a lot sometimes. Like, I notice that with certain words, I'm like, whoa, where'd that come from?
Yeah, I grew up in Frankfurt, but my mom, her family's all from Barberville, which is like southeastern Kentucky.
Yeah, I know.
And when she talks to her family, she's suddenly saying can't for can't. And we're like, there's not an I in can't, Mom. And she's like, well, I can't help it. And I'm like, you don't talk like that until you're talking to them.
Yep. That's like my friend's mom. Like, they're from Central Kentucky, but her family is his mother's family is from Eastern Kentucky. So like every once in a while she'll call piano Piani, and I'm like, what'd you just say, Daddy?
I've never heard that.
Appalachian.
Oh, hardcore Appalachia, man. Like, it just comes out, man. It's so hilarious. So to get us to, I'm sorry, I'm ADHD. It's Tangent City. But to bring it kind of back around,
this is our life.
What do you guys have, like, besides the podcast coming out, which by the way is going to be super great? Do you guys got any other stuff in the pipeline? You guys working on some new books, some things like that?
Always.
We've been working on a story together, actually. Another. In the realm, it's in the same like universe as Lost in Grey.
I was gonna ask, yeah.
So it's
but
a
completely different characters.
Yeah, it's a character that was in like the prologue.
Yeah, like a little side character.
The side character gets her own story now.
That's awesome.
It's gonna be called Bodies Beneath the Autumn Leaves.
Oh God, that's creepy as shit. I love that title. That sounds like such a good like thriller.
Why can't we come up with shit like this?
That's all, Anna. I'm horrible at titles. My first was called Paranormal-ish. And then that title came.
I kind of like that too, though.
Because I was like, I can't think of a title. And my dad goes, well, what would you consider it? I said, I don't know, Paranormal-ish. He's like, well, there you go. That's your title.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not great with titles. She's like, she'll say something. I'm like, oh my gosh, that'd be a great title. And sometimes we remember to write them down, and other times they get lost.
Or then sometimes Lindsay's phone breaks, and then we lose a ton of notes.
Oh,
I was able to back up a lot of my notes, but I did lose some. Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask that.
But devastating.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. What's the process of writing together? I mean, do you guys like flip chapters, or is there a process of how to write together?
Well, when we did Lost in Grey, I had actually started NaNoWriMo back in, what was it, like 2015. And I got stuck at like 10,000 words and went nowhere. And then like a year or so later, Anna wrote a story that was completely separate. And then she got stuck and it went nowhere. And then fast forward to 2017, somehow we got on the subject of looking at these stories and we're like, these are very similar. And so we put them together and like we connected the pieces.
Each story had a coma person in it.
Yeah, like it was crazy how similar it was. So we just connected the dots there, and then basically we would each get ideas of things that we wanted to put into the story. So we would write that chapter, or send it to the other one,
or
send
whatever.
It to the next one. We would so like if Anna wrote it, she would send it to me. I would sit down, read over it, add things in, change things, whatever.
You have to mention how awful my talk to text is.
She would do
my
talk to
sister
text.
Kelly.
She would do talk to text. So a lot of the rewriting was me just deciphering, and I'd call her, what is this supposed to say? But then, so then like I would rewrite, send it back to her, and then we would get on, we're always on FaceTime. So then we would be working while on FaceTime and just sitting down, reading it out loud to each other, editing as we went together. So that way it all blended.
So at some point, we both had a hand in every word that went into that story.
Exactly.
Whether we originated it from our own brain or not, like we touched every individual piece of that.
And then of course there were pieces that we just came up from scratch together on the phone.
Yeah.
Wow. That's fascinating, man.
Yeah.
Like, man,
and I don't know how other people do it. I mean, honestly, somebody was like, I expected it to come off like reading two separate people's writings, but it didn't come off that way. I was like, oh, thank God.
What a compliment.
Yeah. Like one of my favorite pairs, of course, is Stephen King and his son Joe Hill. Because I love both of them separately as authors, but the stories they've written together have been great. And the same to you guys. It's like that's fascinating. And it's like Lance and I work together. We're fighting and punching each other, and we're not even writing a book together. It's like, how do you not like clash heads on that? And
because we're just the same person. That's what we always say. We're extensions of each other. Yeah, that's what we've always said.
Well, and like it's really important, and like I'm gonna get all like on my soapbox for a second. Whenever, because nobody understands our relationship, and they're like, I just wish I could have what y'all have. Well, that's cute, but you can't have what we have for a lot of reasons, because for one, this is years of effort and trauma and everything. Growth. I mean, if we have a disagreement, which is very rare, it's usually about TV shows, books, or music. Minuscule.
That's understandable.
Minuscule, but also like very important shit.
Right.
But we'll be like, no, let me explain to you why.
You don't like that?
Let me explain to you why I think this was good and you should give it a shot. And like, but if it was something more serious, we would have an adult conversation instead of being petty, like a lot of other relationships have gone. And it's just like a lot of people don't get that. Like
what was that word again? Conversation.
Yeah,
I haven't heard communication.
Wow, I haven't heard that in a while.
No, it's funny. We
a lot better.
We're both improvisers, and so we talk about that a lot. When I teach corporate team building and stuff too, that yes and idea is that it's like, okay, here's my idea, and the other person just immediately says, okay. Yeah. And here's what I can add to it, and here's how this can work. Maybe I'm not familiar with it or whatever, but that's exactly what it sounds like you guys already do, is you appreciate and respect the other person's idea so much right off the bat that you're already finding ways to add to it. So
the whole premise behind Lost and Grey started because I told her she needed to write more, and I was like giving her a pep talk.
Let me just say, Anna did not know she was a writer until one day. I think it was maybe when I was writing my original short story that became my portion of Lost and Grey. She just texted me a journal entry she had written the night before. She's like, I had a really bad night. Like I wrote and just sent that over to me so I would kind of know like where her headspace was that day. And I was like, do you know you were a writer? She was like, no, I'm not. I'm like, no, seriously, you're a writer. And then that excerpt actually ended up in the dedication.
That's fantastic. Yep. That's so cool.
Nice.
I really, really like that. I mean, and that's precisely why we had to have you guys on together. Not to say that you're no good apart, but it's just like this story together is what makes you guys stand out so much. Not just your works together, but even your work separately. I'm sure that they have influenced your solo stuff too.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Everything that she like writes, she runs by me and vice versa. And like, it's not that like we need each other's approval. We're just so damned excited to share it with the other person, because she's my biggest supporter. I mean, next to my husband, but he doesn't write. So it's a different type of support.
Yeah.
And like, and then outside of Lindsey, her dad is like, whoa, buddy.
Who is also a writer.
He's a phenomenal writer, but like, he's like the biggest pep rally. Woo, go team, go. Like, he will make you feel jazzed about yourself in like 5 seconds flat. So
that's fantastic.
It's just nice to have good support team in place.
Yeah.
Right.
Especially when you're a creative type, because
you want to share your stuff, but you don't always want to share it publicly.
Right.
So I know before I even had the idea like to put out Exercising My Mind, those are all just things I wrote going through hard times. And Anna heard every single one of them before it ever was even an idea to make a book. And because it's things that I wanted to share, and like, I could share it with her because she's a good support, but she'll also be like, hey, what about saying this, like changing things up, especially when I decided to make it a book. So that way people can't be like, are you writing about me?
I told you, exercising your mind still hits me deep.
Oh, well, what a compliment, because that was, I've never been so scared to hit publish on a book in my life.
Oh, man. Not to say I'm glad you did, because I know that was hard, but I'm glad you did, because it spoke to me.
I'm glad I did, too, because it does help.
It shows your range. It's more than just, I write spooky stories. It's, look at me, I write brilliant shit. Like, you are just absolutely fantastic, and I love you to pieces.
I agree this for both of you, to be honest with you. Both of you are absolutely fantastic. And to ask this, so kind of the last question here I want to ask is, you got somebody who's interested in writing, or maybe writes, little stories in their journals or whatever. What kind of advice would you give to an up and coming? And it doesn't necessarily have to be a horror writer, though, of course, that's our edge here. But still, you've got somebody that wants to take their writing to the next level. What do you suggest?
Writing prompts are an excellent place to start if you don't know where to start besides like just journal entries. Lindsey gave me this book, actually. It's called Write the Story, and it's got a bunch of writing prompts in it, and it's really been helpful for when I get stuck. Beyond that, write down your dreams, write down your fears, write down your hopes. Just write a review of something sitting next to you. Give it like an honest review. Nobody has to read this. Just get words out. And the more you write, the more natural it feels.
Absolutely. And I would also just say, kind of going back to something I mentioned earlier, if it is somebody who's wanting to write scarier things, don't be scared, or even if you are scared, push yourself to go beyond that high school line of like, you can write whatever you want. It doesn't matter if in high school, oh, that's a little inappropriate, you're going to go to the counselor, something's wrong with you. Like, just write it, because I promise you there's more messed up stuff out there.
Amen. Turn on the news.
Yep.
Reality is always a lot more horrific than your horror.
Well, and if you think that your Google search history is going to be scary, then, make it as fictionalized as possible. It doesn't have to be a nonfiction book.
Yep, or use a Tor browser. One or the other. I wanted to give one quick story before we get out of here, just to show the weird connection. And Lindsey knows this is when I was moving out here. One of the stops on the way to Arizona was Elk City, Oklahoma. We just picked it. It was a random ass stop point that we were like, yeah, we'll stop there. And there happened to be this like Route 66 museum and just this different stuff when we're going through. And they're like, oh, where y'all from? I said, oh, I'm from Kentucky. And they're like, oh, we just had somebody here from Kentucky the other day. How weird is that? And then her and I were just chit-chatting. She's like, oh, that's weird. My dad was just there. I was like, holy shit, that's who they were talking about. And it was literally, we were like a day or two apart from each other in this very small town.
That's crazy.
Because that was October, right? Somewhere around there.
It was October.
Yeah, that's when my dad and sister were on their way down here to come visit us.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Like that. The other person from Kentucky is connected to me. I was laughing so hard when I found that out.
What a small world, right?
Yeah, what an absolutely small world.
Well, if you ever find yourself in Oklahoma, hit me up and we'll get coffee.
Yes, for sure, because we usually tend to drive through there on the road to Kentucky if we drive. So absolutely. Before we go, I want to give you guys a chance to, share, plug your stuff. We know Amazon right away. You guys can find most of your stuff on there. And is there anything else you wanted to plug?
Coming in like 3 weeks, our podcast, Ghosts in the Attics, Bodies in the Basement. And stay tuned for hopefully within the next year, Bodies Beneath the Autumn Leaves. Yeah.
Yes. I want some audio versions. Me and Lance will do that.
Okay. If somebody can read our books, because like I can't read.
Oh, I will I do audio stuff. I do voiceover. I would gladly read your books.
Then we need to talk, because I have many people say, put this on Audible. And I'm like,
I have friends ask me all the time.
Yeah,
to do
I'm
Audible,
signed up
and
on
I'm
Audible
just
to do
nervous.
voiceover. So yeah, we will definitely talk, because I would gladly reread your guys' books again and do it out loud. So Lindsey, you got anything else for you at all?
Well, I do have a blog. I don't update it as frequently as I should. But if you're into some sporadic writing that's not paranormal and all that side and just like life stuff, that is straightupthoughts.weebly.com.
Awesome. Yes. And we love you guys so much. Thank you guys for coming over and sharing your time with us and talking to us. And I'm excited. We will have you guys back again for sure. And we'll do something together. Maybe we'll watch a movie together or review a book or something. We'll have us some fun. But thank you so much, Anna. Thank you so much, Lindsey. So we got Lindsey Behee and Anna Timperley. Thank you so much.
Woo! Thank you. Woo!
Thank you so much for having us.
And with that, dear friends, we come to the end of another delightfully disturbing episode of Misters of the Dark. As always, thank you for listening. Thank you to the Fearscape Media Network, and thank you to Corey Adams and Ashley Jones Adams from Nothing Wrong for our musical theme. And yes, goodbye, Miss Behee. Farewell, Miss Timperley. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Oh, shit.
Stefan, what are we going to do?
Oh, yeah. Well, listen, I've been giving it some thought, and then it occurred to me, when was the last time we did some good old-fashioned demon hunting?
You don't mean.
Oh, you know it. Get the sawed-off double-barreled shotguns out of the closet! But before we go, dear friends, I will leave you with this. Everybody is a book of blood. Wherever we're opened, we're read. Good night!
Yo, she-witch, suck on this.